Alright, so I haven't made a video in a while because we've had some family stuff going on. But I'm going to do a bedding job on this Tikka T3. And I just kind of wanted to give a view of what it actually looks like. On the inside of the stock, there's plenty of missing material, I guess I could say. Because it looks as though they molded out any support in places where it's needed. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to mix up some epoxy. I'm going to fill in especially around these screw holes because it's kind of needed, and then I'll fit the action to the stock, and I'll show you what the epoxy looks like before I set the action back into the stock. Okay, so right here you can see where I've added the plumber's putty, especially in the recess for the trigger group, because I definitely don't want any epoxy in that area. Every place else on the action that I don't want epoxy touching, I've added plumber's putty. You can see this is the pinhole for the bolt release. These are the slots where the safety mechanism and the trigger group lap over. So I don't want epoxy going in those areas. Now I'm coating the action down real good with a paste wax. I like paste wax as a release agent. It's easier to remove after the action is pulled back out of the stock than some of the release agents that come with the epoxy kits that are such a pain in the butt to get out. So I'm using a paste wax to act as a release agent, and a good liberal coat. I know it looks kind of lumpy, but when it's set down into the stock with the epoxy, it smooths out and it releases a lot better than some of the release agents that are kind of like almost sticky. Have to especially make sure that the recoil lug recess isn't filled with wax, because I want it to fit tight, but it's just covered. Alright, and I'll be right back. Alright, so we've filled in the gaps with the epoxy. I'm kind of letting it self-level. I left it real thin and loose so that it would flow into those crevices. And I think we're about ready to set the action back into the stock, and we'll be back. So we got the action in the stock. We got the epoxy oozing out where it's supposed to be oozing out, so that I know I have enough epoxy where I need to have enough epoxy. I like to use the clamping method with some studs. I don't like to run the action screws up through the action when I've got a full bed of epoxy sitting in the stock. I've heard too many horror stories of somebody thinking that's a good idea and they push epoxy into the breech end of the action, and then you got to try to get in there with a special tool of some kind that you have to remove the epoxy that's in the breech end. Oh, it's just a mess. So I like to use a stud method and some clamps, and I know that when it comes out of the stock, everything will be where it needs to be, and I don't have to worry about getting epoxy into the breech area of the action. Anyway, we're going to let this sit and let the epoxy dry, and we'll show you what happens when we take it out of the stock. Alright, our barrel came out clean. Barrel to action, I should say. Came out clean. And now you can see where we've got a solid bed, or a solid section of the stock here where the recoil lug and the front ring of the action, and then the rear mounting point, a rear section of the action has been set into a solid bed. Little cleanup, and we'll mount the action back in the stock. Should be good to go.